Hi, and welcome back. Today we're gonna have a look at modular droning for beginners. We'll go over a couple of interesting modules and patch tips in 4 categories: sound generators, sound shapers, modulators, and mixers. Of course, there are no real rules here and experimentation is key, so this is just some inspiration to get you started. Have a look at my Patreon if you want to read more about my plans and support this video series. But now, let's dive right in. In the Eurorack format, we have a wide range of complex sound sources to begin with. We'll have a look at a few of them, but then we go into patching up complexity with some basic ingredients. I quickly want to mention wavetable oscillators. Modules like the Synthesis Technology E350 or Erica Synth's Black Wavetable VCO are digital modules that offer a wide range of complex waveforms and the ability to smoothly morph from one shape to another by slowly scanning through wavetables. This is instantly satisfying and great for drones. On the analog side, complex oscillators like the Make Noise DPO, Verbos Electronics Complex Oscillator, or Endorphin's Further Generator are single modules that can create complex sounds and entire drones on their own. Most complex oscillators are structured in a similar way and you can patch one up yourself. Take one oscillator and connect it to a wave folder. Use this output as your audio. Then take a second oscillator and take the output to the modulatable inputs of the first oscillator as well as the wave folder. Finally, also take the output of the main oscillator or the folded result to modulate the second, so you can create cross-modulation between the oscillators. Make sure all the inputs have attenuators though, so you can control the modulation amount. Complex oscillators and wavetable VCOs can create sounds with a lot of interesting harmonics. Paired with a good reverb, they can keep you droning for hours. But let's have a look at what we can do with a single basic VCO. In general though, if you're new to modular or droning, the more in and outputs your oscillator has, the more options you have for patching and sound modulation. On the input side, things like exponential and linear frequency modulation, pulse width control, and sync input will give you ways to change the character of a sound over time. For example, take a slow LFO to modulate the pulse width input, and feed an audio rate LFO through a VCA opened by a slow random voltage to modulate the linear FM input. Unsynced modulation sources to different parameters will keep things interesting for a long time. On the output side, simultaneous different waveform outputs and or a sub-output will give you more signal paths to mess around with. It works great to send the different outputs through different effects and patches, and then bring them back together in a later stage. Even if you only have one output, it's still worth it to try and mold that output into multiple paths for different treatments. If your oscillator doesn't have a sub-output, you can make one with an analog clock divider. Depending on the divisions it offers, you could even create chords this way. Other simple tricks are sending 2 different waveforms to a crossfader to give you some basic wave shape morphing. It can also be worth it to try and send audio through a VCA and then modulate that VCA with audio rates. Here's a square wave through a VCA modulated by a fast square wave LFO. Of course, the more oscillators you have, the more chaos you can create. Oscillator banks are great for chords, swarming drones, and cross-modulated madness. A group of oscillators gives you the possibility to tune in chords or tones that are tuned very similar, but with just a nice beat frequency to it. Then use very subtle modulation to have the tuning slowly drift over time. Again, individual control over frequency and individual outputs will give you the most out of it. Here's a sample. What you hear is just the mix output of the dupe for quad VCO. remember though, in modular land a lot of things can make sound. As long as they are able to go into audio rates, things like LFOs, looping envelopes and self-resonant filters can be used as sound sources or audio rate modulators. Quite often in drones, exact tuning is not the first concern anyway. Here's my quadra, just 4 looping attack decay envelopes making noise. In my case, also the MFB dual LFO can create nice tones. I especially like the stepped random voltages at audio rate, making nice dark noise. Finally, I want to mention sample players like the Distinct Mark IV or Tip-Top Audio 1 to add character to your sound. It's nice to collect a bank of more steady samples like nature sounds, humming noises and self-made field recordings. Then try mixing them in with your voices before going to sound shapers or effects. No matter what size your system is, experiment with the modules you have to see what sounds you can come up with. Besides sound generators, things like filters and wavefolders are a great way to add subtle character changes to a sound. However, the possibilities in Euroland have become pretty much endless. Beside filters and wavefolders, there are things like distortions and bit crushers and so on, and a fast growing amount of modular effects. Just like with oscillators though, modules with more in and outputs will give you more freedom to experiment and can set modules ahead of plugins or pedals. For filters, an example, next to the frequency cutoff, it creates more sonic possibilities to have CV control over the input drive, resonance, or filter mode. If your filter nicely overdrives but doesn't have a CV input for that, just patch a VCA between the oscillator and filter. And if there's no resonance CV, you can try and see what happens if you patch up a feedback circuit yourself, with a VCA in between to control the amount. Low-pass filters are of course great for low dark drones, but definitely look into using high-pass and band-pass filters to create that more characterful high end in your drones. Splitting a single sound source into a parallel high and low-pass filter gives you a way to sculpt and modulate both the low and high end of your sound and have them fade in and out separately. Chaining filters on a sound source is also nice. This will give you many ways to shape and control your sound. Classic tricks are to use a high-pass filter, open up the resonance but use it to boost the low end of your sound, and then pass it through a low pass for control of the top end. Or feed your sound into a low-pass filter with a lot of resonance to make it scream, and then another low pass to tame it again. To tame sounds, for example just the harshest frequencies out of a nice high-pass filtered sound, a simple low-pass gate can often do the trick as well. Fixed filter banks, like the Doopfer A128, are also something to look into if you like drones. These give you individual control over different bands on the frequency spectrum and are great for shaping a sound in detail. I personally really like wavefolders. Not just for drones, you can experiment with it and try running everything through it. Even running already complex wavetables through it sounds great. I love using the main and sub output of my wavetable oscillator, or just 2 simple detuned triangles. Or just run a bunch of looping envelopes through it. Here's my quadra again, but now through a folder with some reverb. And then there are a gazillion other options to shape your sound. Various distortions, bit crushers, resonators, ring modulators, overdrives, equalizers, and so on. Just check around what's available and listen to sound demos if you're interested. Some of these can really give a unique character to your sound, again, often with nice modular control. And of course, we have to mention a good reverb and delay. If you're starting out, it's pretty easy to run your sound through a VST, and there are also many pedals and non-modular effects available. But modular effects with CV control over the parameters can add something nice. There are definitely too many options to mention and get into depth with right now, but some multi-effect units on the more affordable side are the Tip-Top Z5000, Happy Nerding FX 8XL, and the Erica Synths Drum Dual FX. They offer a variety of basic delay and reverbs, with some modular CV control over the parameters. A famous flexible reverb with a lot of control is the Make Noise Reverb. Some ideas to do with modular control is to use slow LFOs to have the amount of an effect swell in and out. Or have something like a mix of clock divisions determine the delay time. Slowly modulated fast delays are also a great way to fatten up a sound. Here's just a single saw wave through my Syntratec Echo. I also want to mention spring reverbs. If you like the experimental analog side of modular, there are affordable great sounding spring reverbs available. And having the possibility to automate the input volume or feedback with CV in a patch can lead to great results. They can also be great sound sources on their own, especially if you patch up a bandpass or fixed filter bank in a feedback path. Final tip here is to not just use sound shaping modules like filters or even effects as the end of your chain, but experiment with them. Try running modulation sources through distortions, run oscillators through delays and reverbs before the filters and folders. Run effects through VCA to chop them up, and so on. In the Eurorack format, the effects go much more complex though, and I'm definitely not familiar with all of them. Things like the IntelliGel Design's Rainmaker or Mutable Instruments Clouds offer many different and unique ways to mangle and create sounds, and a huge rabbit hole to get lost in. When it comes to modulation for drones, slowly changing sources and ones that can inject some random are especially nice. Always check the cycle speed of modules you're interested in. There are many complex options though. Modules with a digital brain like the Mutable Instrument Stages or DIY Ornament and Crime offer many different functions to choose from if you don't mind spending some more time to learn how to use your module. And the very popular Make Noise Math is a great module to read up on if you like experimenting with voltages. But basics here are simple LFOs and envelope generators. I'm personally a fan of the Doepfer A143 series, if you need a place to start. The quad LFO can go to about 1 hour cycles and create really interesting sounds and modulation like we've seen before. Also, the Doepfer Quad ADSR has a very wide range, and the unique thing about this module is that it has gate outputs for each of its stages. By taking these gates to gate other envelopes, you can create ongoing rhythmic modulation patterns. Like with the others, having CV inputs gives you more to experiment with. You can cross-modulate LFOs with CV control over their frequency to create new shapes. Also, try running LFOs through wavefolders for more creative shapes. They also work on low frequencies. I also like running modulation sources with harder edges, like square wave LFOs, through a filter or gate to have voltage control over the smoothness of the wave. If you have a looping attack decay envelope with voltage control, you can use that to change the shape of the envelope. It's also interesting to have a clock divider retrigger LFOs or gate envelopes to create slow rhythmic modulation. Using a crossfader to fade between two sources can also sound great. And like we've covered in my previous video, if you don't have one, you can patch it up yourself with some basic utility, or make a patch where you fade one source to two different destinations. Another thing I really like for drone and ambient sounds are smooth random voltages. Slow random voltages can add nice organic changes to your sound, and subtle fast random voltages can add nice textures. There's the Doepfer Noise and Random with a rather fast but musical random voltage. Modules like the Make Noise Wogglebug and Mutable Instruments Marbles offer a nice variety of random signals. Slowly changing random voltages are harder to find though. I use peaks a lot for this, as you can use it as a dual LFO and set the LFO shape to smooth random at pretty slow speeds. And the nonlinear circuit triple slot is a DIY project you should have a look at if you like evolving ambient drones. A classic way to make random voltages with basic modules is to take a noise source and feed it to a sample and hold module. Then, anytime you feed it a trigger, it will hold the current value and you get random step voltages at your desired speed. Then, if you feed it through a slew limiter, you can control the speed with which the voltage can rise or fall and change the signal in one that's slowly going up or down. And like I mentioned earlier, you can create nice fluctuating voltages by cross-modulating triangle or sine wave LFOs. I find that two LFOs quickly end up in a loop though, but if you add another LFO for triple cross-modulation, or have the amount of modulation between two LFOs changed by passing it through a VCA, and control that VCA with a third LFO, you can make the signal as complex as you like. Once you have some interesting sounds with nice modulation going on, it comes down to balancing those sounds and making interesting layers and compositions over time. So like I mentioned earlier, it works great to create different audio paths from a single or multiple oscillators and stack them together. Here you see a few examples. Having a simple mixer to manually mix the different sounds you've created in and out can be enough. I still often use an outboard mixer for this, so I can EQ the different sounds easily. A matrix mixer is a tool that offers more creativity within your patches, both for audio and CV. It has 4 inputs connected to horizontal rows of knobs, which gives you the possibility to make 4 unique vertical mixes. It can function as a playable patch bay to divide different audio sources over effects, or to spread modulation sources over different destinations. You can also use summing VCAs to automate the mixing process as part of your drone. You can feed it different voices or variations and then use random voltages or complex LFOs to change their volume over time. It works great to mult a modulation source and invert one of them to have one sound oppressed while another rises. Using different unsynced modulation will give you more organic shifting changes. Of course, great and unique drones come from experimenting and having fun. And the modulator is a great tool for this because it gives you so much freedom to experiment. You can use envelope generators and LFOs as sound sources, and you can patch up effects in different places in your audio chain. If you're new to this, you might want to check my previous video where I go over some ways to control your control voltages with basic utilities. If you enjoyed this, subscribe for more content. Soon we'll have a look at self-generating patches. But that's it for now, thanks for watching and see you next time.